Welcome back to another sci-fi episode where psychology and finances collide. We're going to continue to talk about how we think, feel, and behave as it pertains to economic abuse or some new definitions, Olivia definitions, of what might be considered financial harm or financial self-harm. So today I have another guest, and I will allow her to introduce herself here shortly. But if you haven't gone back and listened to the first 2 episodes on this topic in the month of October, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I would invite you to listen to those. Even if you've never experienced any form of economic abuse or interpersonal violence, domestic abuse, etc., it's great for you to have some level of education so that if you're a parent, you can help your child look out for some red flags. And if you've never learned about teen dating violence, I think now is the time. There's even coercion that can occur in a teen's life that will have lasting implications through that teenager's adulthood, especially if they were coerced into sending certain kind of pictures within a text messages or a video within text messages. Those things can greatly impact future employment prospects, etc., etc. So learn about the different forms of interpersonal violence so that you can help not only yourself, but those that you love as well. So we're going to kick it off today with having Breanna introduce herself and why I brought her on this episode. Go ahead.
Hey, Olivia. My name is Breanna Burgess, and I'm the domestic abuse victim advocate for Redstone Arsenal. I've worked here specifically for almost 5 years now, but I've also worked in domestic violence emergency shelters or safe homes, working with human trafficking victims, sexual assault, you name it. So I'm really happy to be here.
So what I love about Breanna and what she does here at Redstone Arsenal, and which, by the way, what Breanna does is also available in the community. When we start talking about different resources that folks could use, even with previous episodes where I had Tim on, there are plenty of resources in the community where you can get your Tim, you can get your Breanna. If you're thinking, I'm not at Redstone and I sure would love to have someone like that advocating for me, we do have those advocates in the community wherever you are, and I'll be sure to tell you how you can find that for yourself. But what Breanna does that is very unique is safety planning. And I remember when I provided clinical therapy, one of the better tools that I had was the safety planning aspect. Now, granted, I didn't have a victim advocate where I could just refer them and say, hey, Breanna is right next door. Let me just move you on over here. She'll take good care of you. I had to do a level of safety planning in the actual session. But what Breanna does is like safety planning on steroids. And this is what I love about Breanna, is that she will sit with you and she will actually help you understand what it is. First of all, clarifying what the needs are, and then moving forward in such a way to where you could get to the end result safely and in a manner that is not demeaning, but also gives you some greater confidence. Mm-hmm. So, Breanna, let's talk just a little bit about elder abuse, and then we'll go into some other things. But I really like how the CDC defines what they call older person abuse. And of course, we're going to have synonymous terms all over the place, but I grew up calling it elder abuse. A lot of folks remember it as elder abuse, but the CDC says older person abuse. They define it as an intentional act or failure to act that causes or creates a risk of harm to an older adult. An older adult is someone aged 60 or older. Lo and behold, one of the 5 categories of older person abuse is financial abuse. And here's how they define it. the illegal, unauthorized, or improper use of money, benefits, property, or assets for the benefit of someone other than the older adult. Wow. I love that. It encapsulates everything that could potentially protect an older individual from being victimized by somebody. And this is such a prevalent issue, Breanna, that the DOJ has statutes on elder financial exploitation. Mm-hmm. And we talked a lot about what financial exploitation is. But here's what I've seen. I've seen amongst even the Redstone Arsenal community, and again, maintaining confidentiality, what I've seen in the older population, which they define as 60 plus, coerced debt. Co-signing, they'll co-sign for their adult child, they'll co-sign for a loved one, and then the debt goes unpaid. And so then that elder or older person, their credit report, their credit score, it takes a hit. Stolen property. I have had clients sit in my office, my now non-clinical office, saying things like, she doesn't need it anyway. Or, here's another one, coercing the older person to gift them with varying assets while they were in a vulnerable state. Who is driving grandma to the colonoscopy? Who's driving grandpa to his next visit where he might have to have some level of anesthesia? And so most likely following a post-op procedure. Yes, these are predators that are preying on the vulnerable. And Breanna, her specialty is helping the vulnerable protect themselves against predators. Not necessarily with elder abuse, but elder abuse definitely needed an honorable mention in all of this. But Breanna, let's get into some of the things that struck you as you were listening to these episodes prior to.
Yeah, so you guys have talked about a lot of really important things. I want to touch on the safety planning probably first, but, just as we start, every case is going to be different, right? Like, there's absolutely no cookie-cutter situation with domestic violence. Mm-hmm. There's no Band-Aid that you can just apply to every particular element that will work for each and every person. So safety planning is a lot of just a back and forth. It's a collaborative effort between me and the victim or survivor that I'm working with, and it will look totally different. Right. We always want to start with your overall physical safety immediately, where you're at and what the situation is. With financial abuse, though, or economical abuse, it's going to look a little bit more slow-paced, I guess. Mm-hmm. You're going to want to evaluate, your personal assets and liabilities and find out where those things may be. If you don't know what bank accounts you have, how do you fix it, right? So that's what we'll start with.
And Breanna has sent clients to me.
Oh, yeah.
So in many ways, I become an extension mm-hmm. of the safety planning for them to understand what they have.
Yes.
What are the assets? What are the things that they could pull upon in a pinch mm-hmm. if they needed to get here, or if they desired to have an interview here, what kind of clothing, those mm-hmm. things. So, yeah. So that's a huge portion of it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Utilizing your, community resources is big, but you got to be really aware of all of that at the same time. So you want to make sure that you're not going to tip off your abuser. So maybe having your mail forwarded to a different, like P.O. box or something that only you know about. Different parts to it where you just really don't want to tip anybody off. Mm-hmm. So you want to disclose that to the person you're working with. And then just keeping in mind how electronics and things might be being utilized against you or could be utilized mm-hmm. against you. Yeah, and then, just planning forward motion, so making small goals to achieve, setting aside money, maybe go to Walmart and get cash back. Mm-hmm. Little tips like that, and then as we go through it, we're just looking at what are you going through, what are your challenges, and what do you need done right now.
Right. And as you're talking about that, I think back to the 3 subsets of economic abuse. Mm-hmm. So the first one being economic control, where it prevents survivors from having knowledge or access to bank accounts, credit cards, and other shared assets, involving denying access to food, clothing, medications, and tracking their use of money. So where you come into play, especially if they're tracking your use of money, you're going to create a safety plan to help them mitigate that extra harm that might befall them should the abuser discover that they're using this, and they're using this to finally break their power and control over them. So the other one is economic exploitation, which includes behaviors like stealing from an intimate partner, gambling joint money, opening credit lines without permission, or refusing to pay bills with the intent to ruin credit. And one of the clients that you had sent me, it was, hey, do you know how to pull your credit report? No, I don't. Well, let me show you how. This is what's going to help you understand what someone may have been up to without you knowing. And sure enough, it's there. Black and white, the financial harm that has occurred. And again, further safety planning, disputing, educating, right? Showing them how to dispute something on the credit report. And then employment sabotage. One of the things that I've noted with Breanna is she talks a lot about financial independence and how do you get to that place. And many times it involves employment. But unfortunately, some folks, that perpetrator will continue to sabotage those employment opportunities. And again, back to the definition, preventing someone obtaining or maintaining employment or education, harassing them, interfering with obtaining other forms of income, including disability and child support. So when you're in Breanna's presence, she's going to do a full assessment of what are the potential resources that you have available. So I like that about what you're doing, Breanna. You're making a real difference.
Well, thank you. We'll spend a lot of time, working out what we got to do moving forward. Might be a few hours, might be 5 hours, but we'll get it done. And you just got to look at all the elements one piece at a time, and it's like a building block, to a bigger picture.
Have you ever had someone who started and then wanted to stop?
I have, yes, yeah.
And I think we could sit here all day long and probably think about several different theories of why someone may have stopped the safety planning. But one of the things that keeps coming back to me when I see someone in my office providing financial education and helping them build some literacy and knowledge and skill is they don't fully understand that they are being financially abused. So let's get into a topic where I'm probably not the first therapist to do this, so it's not my own, but I call it financial harm because there are times when someone might believe they don't meet the full criteria for domestic violence or interpersonal violence, intimate partner violence. Domestic abuse, there are so many synonymous terms, but they may not believe that they meet that full criteria, so they're not taking it as seriously. But even if someone were to call you and say, you know what, Breanna, I don't know for sure if this meets the criteria, but I know for sure that financial harm is being done, will you see that person?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So we see that a lot with, financial abuse because survivors tend to blame themselves for the situation that they're in, and that goes across the board, of course. But with financial abuse, it's like, how could I have been so stupid? And unfortunately, that's how they're approaching me, but it's not how we see it. It's you were manipulated by somebody that you loved. And, I always like to say, it is okay to love an abuser. it's not okay for them to abuse you.
Right. I like that.
So when they come to me and they feel like they don't understand if this is abuse, maybe I'm just, being, left in the dark and I don't know, I explain that to them. I explain that, there's absolutely nothing that you can't walk in my door with and just, we'll talk about it, and definitely the financial piece is understanding that you don't have to have bruises for it to be abused.
It doesn't always leave a mark.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
Most often these days that I see is a lot of the financial abuse where they truly didn't know.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons I started with elder abuse, because there are a lot of older individuals, 60 plus, who do not view it as elder abuse.
Right.
And if we really looked at it, it may qualify, even if it doesn't. And I have some examples where you can see where it doesn't necessarily fit the criteria for all the things we've talked about in all these episodes, but it still causes harm. So how about when a parent continues to ask for money from a child, and that child has such a hard time setting boundaries? And we're talking mostly adult children, right, who are pulling in a paycheck, and it's a good pay, especially here at Redstone Arsenal. We got some high income earners here. And so sometimes these parents will, I don't want to use the word prey upon their children, but many times they're like, wow, I helped you out all these years. Hey, can you help me out a little bit, right? But people will ask, well, what's the harm? What's the harm in asking my kids? Well, you're probably robbing that child from opportunities like a positive credit score. And Tim and I talked about generational footholds. And so you're reinforcing a generational foothold rather than encouraging them to break free from poverty or over-indebtedness, right? Or we've witnessed young adults struggle with setting financial boundaries because their parents or extended family members have coached them how to intentionally rack up debt and be absolved of it later. That's robbing people. And that's causing us to have a higher interest rate on our credit cards, right? You don't just write stuff off and then it's gone forever. Someone always pays the price, right? Or when an adult child continues to ask for money from a parent. Oh, it's so sad. And then they ask, what's the harm? Well, you're potentially robbing that parent from a comfortable retirement. Or when a spouse or a committed partner makes major purchases without the knowledge and engages in behaviors where they're living or giving beyond their means. And Olivia, what's the harm in that? Well, you're robbing each other of financial intimacy, positive credit score, and even financial dreams that you've both had. And I know that your safety planning is not necessarily on financial harm per se, but more so on those economic abuse scenarios that we talked about earlier.
Right, yeah. The financial aspect of it is one of the biggest barriers to a victim or survivor leaving the situation. It becomes overwhelming. It becomes just impossible in their minds, especially because when you look at our world, how do you get a job if you don't have money for a vehicle? Or, it's just a vicious cycle. So the barriers when it comes to finances, especially when you don't even realize how much debt you have until you start looking, it becomes a burden that they think they can't bear.
Exactly.
Right. So empowering them to, find out exactly what their situation is and giving them the resources to take baby steps to getting out of that is.
And we're going to talk about those buffers and resources in just a minute, but it would not be a sci-fi episode without Olivia stepping on your toes. Okay, not your toes, Breanna, but the audience. So get your steel-toed boots on. We're gonna talk about this. Not only is there financial harm, where there are financial harmful behaviors that are occurring but may not meet the clinical criteria for true economic abuse, but it's still something that needs to be explored. How do I help set boundaries, financial boundaries? But now we're going to move into how you might be financially harming yourself. Self-financial sabotage. And this is where we just economically abuse ourselves, and we can't blame anyone but ourselves. So I've read through the forms of economic abuse over and over again, but just to kind of the encompassing overall definition of economic abuse, it includes behaviors that control someone's ability to acquire, use, and maintain resources, threatening economic security and potential for self-sufficiency. The result limits independence. How are we limiting our own financial independence? How are we threatening our own economic security because we can't keep our finger off the Amazon button, or we have continued to overuse debt, or we've continued to go in a direction perhaps within that generational foothold where your parents have taught you this is how you live on credit, and then you claim bankruptcy or any other method that they're coaching you on, right? So my question to the audience is to take a step, look within. How are you individually behaving to acquire, use, and maintain resources? Is there any irresponsible spending that's going on where now you're depriving yourself of necessities and you're not prioritizing basic needs over luxuries? Then there's that irresponsible borrowing. You're living beyond your means, or irresponsible lending where you're giving beyond your means. Or Breanna and I could do a whole other episode on enabling behaviors, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so how is this impacting you with financial self-harm? But now let's talk about the buffers and resources that we promised. We want to give you some hope and expectation to look beyond whether if this is self-induced or whether it's externally or other induced, how you can change that cycle of abuse. So first of all, if you are in a relationship, increasing financial intimacy, reviewing each other's credit report, and that is a form of bearing all. When you show him your credit report and he shows you his credit report, I would hope this happens either right before you get married or, well, hopefully well before you get married so you can make some decisions. Do I want to marry into this level of debt, right? And if you're single, go ahead and pull back the curtains on your own. Because again, Breanna, some of the cases that you've sent my way, they never even checked their credit report, never even knew there was nefarious activity going on behind their backs. Another one, setting financial boundaries. And I know that you're good at this, Breanna. You have conversations with your folks all the time about, and you use the word empowering, and you can't empower yourself without setting financial boundaries. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, so empowering yourself with your financial boundaries is going to look obviously different for everybody, but knowing, your limits and understanding when you need to pull back, especially when it comes to if you're trying to leave a situation, living beyond your means and things like that is going to be a huge barrier to what you're trying to do and succeed in. So as long as you believe that you're capable of doing these things and getting yourself used to the idea of living differently for a little while or anything like that, it's achievable.
Right. And just because you're married or in a committed relationship doesn't mean you have to co-sign or take on joint debt that you don't want. And actually, it's healthy even in a marriage to say no on things every once in a while. My husband graciously set this tone well before we married. I don't want to live in debt. I want to be able, if we purchase a home, I want to buy a home that is based on one income. Just in case, Olivia, we have kids and you want to stay home with the kids for a period of time, there's no financial stress. I mean, if only all of us had been in their life. Now, he's not perfect, y'all, but he's awesome. Go ahead, Breanna.
Yeah, so that's, abusers don't typically just wake up, one day and say, I'm going to abuse people.
Right.
And especially in a marriage, it all kind of comes on slowly. So in the beginning, if you're capable of it and you have the wherewithal to recognize these flags, knowing that you can't have an open dialogue about finances might be one of your red flags.
It's a huge one. And that's where that other buffer comes into play, educating yourself on personal finance. Now, even folks who are not in an abusive relationship or have red flags, they struggle with this already. So let me tell you, if you are someone who believes that you are being economically abused, I will validate for you. It is not easy learning about personal finance only because of what society tells you to believe, right?
I agree with that.
Because I was a victim of my own thinking, like, oh, this is too hard. Ben, you take care of it. You take care of it. And then when I started learning about personal finance, I was like, this is what you've been telling me all these years. I finally get it. I finally understand it. And let me tell you something. If you have a financially astute partner, there is nothing more of a turn on when you learn about that same topic just as much as there. So that increases that financial intimacy. And by the way, Tim and I are going to have a class on financial intimacy in October. But then through that financial education, you build financial knowledge. Then that knowledge and education leads to literacy and then skill and then know-how. And before you know it, you're investing, you're doing these things. But for those who are just like, Olivia, I just want to know how to do this, start there. You start with the basics. Here's another buffer. Only allow the people who've earned the right to speak into your life about finances. To speak into your life about finances. If Uncle Joe or Aunt Hattie have given inappropriate financial advice to the family for generations, and you're at the dinner table over Thanksgiving and they're telling you, here's how you do this and here's how you do that, here's how you actually build up credit and then wipe it all away in one fell swoop, and it's like the government has given you not government, corporate America has given you free vacations left and right. They exist. We have to set those boundaries with those folks and only take the information that we know to be true and not corrupted to enter into our psyches and actually use it.
Yeah.
Breanna's already said it. Protect yourself and review your credit report. We've had similar clients with those things, and know that you can use all the protections of the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Fair Credit Billing Act and dispute items not only on your credit card but on your credit report if that's not yours. Even if it was your husband, even if it was your wife, you can dispute it and you can call it what it is, financial exploitation. And there are so many protections through these different acts that you can use. Breanna taught me this one. Remember to use the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You can call 800-799-SAFE or 7233 or text START to 88788 or go online to www.thehotline.org. And that's where you can find the Tim and Breanna who can help you through this. And Breanna, if they're in immediate danger, who should they call?
911.
Okay. Is there any alibi before we close this episode?
I just want to say that if you're in a situation where you really want to get out, there are ways, and you don't have to do it alone. Just remember that.
Absolutely. And I will, in the post, provide the Family Advocacy Program information for Redstone Arsenal. If you are a Team Redstone eligible member, you could truly see Tim or Breanna. But if not, know that the national hotline and other resources that I'll make available are there as well. And for folks whose interest was piqued over elder abuse, remember that there are elder attorneys as well. So you can take even a deeper dive, especially if there are some family dynamics with brother and sister or whomever or cousins taking advantage of mom or dad. we have all these folks that are wanting to help you break that cycle of abuse. If you have found this episode helpful, please remember to rate and review the pod wherever you listen.